Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, the Legacy Vault, an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. Today, I'm excited to introduce Andre Pennington. Andre is an Arizona estate planning lawyer and financial professional who is passionate about helping families protect their futures. And driven by his own family values, Andre's firm, Pennington Law, focuses on retirement planning, wills, trusts, estate administration, and litigation across Arizona. Now, let me tell you, Andre brings a unique perspective from his experience as a U.S. Air Force attorney and judge, combined with over 75 jury trials at the state, military, and federal levels. He has been recognized with numerous honors, including distinctions from Forbes Financial Council and super lawyers. Andre is committed to ensuring that vulnerable populations, especially the elderly, are protected from predatory practices. He's also extremely active in this community, supporting foster children, youth sports, and he is a co-founder and director of Arizona's Children's Coalition. Andre's work is driven by his motto, which I got to tell you, I love. His motto is every day is another day to do a great thing. Absolutely love it. On the personal side, Andre and his wife, Amanda, have 6 children, 2 sons and 4 daughters, and 2 dogs. Clearly a very busy guy. Andre, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. The way you made it sound, I was like, who's going to come on the show? Oh, it's me.
Oh, well, I know your background and I know your companies and businesses, and looking at stuff is like, if I really introduce Andre the way I'd like to, we wouldn't have any time for a podcast.
I appreciate that. Yeah, well, thank you
Awesome.
for having me on. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, as you know, as our audience know, we're real people having a real conversation, and so we keep it real and lively, and just have fun conversations. So, one of the things we always like to start with people is, what's your why? What's that thing that gets us out of bed in the morning and drives us forward? And you had mentioned in the past that one of your biggest motivators for getting into estate planning was your grandmother's experience with Alzheimer's,
Right.
and that she hadn't had an estate plan. Can if that's kind of your why, can you share that experience and how you now lead and serve and help seniors and other vulnerable populations?
Yeah. So, my grandmother, number one, I think it's important to know, I met her late in life, right? It wasn't until 23 that I met her. And I saw this movie, I think it was Saving Antoine Fisher or something. It had Denzel Washington in it, and he went looking for his family, and it spawned me to do that. Well, when I met her, it was different than the story I've been told my whole life. I was told that that side of the family didn't want to know me, and it's because of the way I looked. And I had this kind of message playing through my mind and my head, but when I finally did get a hold of her, it was she loved me so much. Like it was incredible to how immediate it was, right? And I got to know her very quickly and I made efforts to go see her and meet her. And it was too small of a time in my life before life kind of struck. And she had the kind of Alzheimer's that was fast, not the kind that drug on. It was just so fast you couldn't adjust to it. And bringing it back to the profession, she didn't have an estate plan at the time or ever. And that really stuck out to me because she needed help faster than what was given to her. So it stuck out in 2 ways. Number one, nobody had the authority to do anything and she wouldn't cooperate. The other part was by the time the state stepped in, this is the state of Nebraska, by the way, but by the time they stepped in to take over, um, a horrific head-on car collision happened in the middle of the night. Who knows why she was driving? She was relatively unscathed, but the other driver was injured. And that's when the state stepped in, and then they do what they do, where, oh, here you need all this care, but now there's a big price tag on the end of it, and we're going to take everything. So I was young at that time. I wasn't even a licensed attorney. I certainly wasn't doing estate planning, nor was estate planning in my mind to do, but it really impacted me because of how special she was in my life. And that last chapter was not the dignity and quality of life that I believe she deserved and that everyone deserves. So I'm diametrically opposed to how the state sets up their rules for this. Um, but I understand how to help people so that they don't fall a victim. And that's when I decided when I get to where I'm going, this is how I'm gonna honor her memory. I'm gonna create a firm that's built around what she should have had. And so everything we do in my firm is based off of that. So that's the short version of it.
Wow. What a what a story. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, as we always say, everyone has an estate plan. It just depends on whether it's the state or if it's the one that you would actually want going forward. But heartwarming story. People are weird, right? You know, so you haven't seen her. You don't meet her till you're 23 years old. Um,
Right before
and
going into law school, as a matter of fact.
right before going in. And what a heartwarming thing that she embraced you and the love and all the stigma and things are kind of erased. But then how long was your time with her following that?
Honestly, I would say about, let's see, 4 years.
Way too short.
Yeah, it's like before I could get myself in a position, I think life is like that sometimes. I try and just trust God in the reasoning. I know because of that, every day I do something that's really positive to the world. I can't solve it for my own family, at least my family of the past, but I solve it for families every single day, and I know the value of it. And if I'm doing my job perfectly right, someone's going to take it for granted that they just have a better plan. But I know what I'm doing, right? Um, but that was the whole thing. It was too fast. I didn't have time to adjust to any of it, and it's like all of a sudden I'm getting a phone call in the middle of the day. She's in Nebraska, I'm in California. Are you coming over for pizza for lunch? And I'm like confused, right? And you're finding out all these things, and some of the things that aren't as pretty either, like, you know, the things that happen when you start to lose the ability to control your functions, right? And these things, and I'm like, how are we still struggling with getting someone to understand that she doesn't have the competency and we need to help her, right? So it really shined the light. I think death and dying makes it an impressionable moment, right? That you never forget. And it became securely one of my whys. Like, we have to protect our elderly. There are a lot of age companies, agencies directing advertisement and in the guise of taking advantage rather than providing services that are well needed, right? And that really stood out to me, right? What had to happen and how it was done before anything right started happening,
Oh,
right?
totally.
So yeah, I kind of made an idea. Like at the time, I wanted to be a rock star trial attorney. I was young and dumb, and I didn't understand what kind of life that actually gave you. But I started out doing that, and then when I felt like I had made it, then I turned around and said, "Okay, now is the time." And so I've been able to integrate those skills along with the estate planning skills that I learned from the Air Force to to really honor her memory by helping other families not go through that. And I just keep focused on that, and then the right things happen.
Yeah, and I love that because it's, you find you don't want your life experience, you don't want someone else to have to live through a similar thing because it is avoidable, right? And which is exactly why I created the legacy vault, because the nightmare of a scavenger hunt that we had to live through trying to find things and track things down. My personal mission is to help 1 million families to avoid having to ultimately go through that. So, which is my what gets me out of bed in the morning,
Yeah.
and works. But I love working with estate planning attorneys because y'all are just so. I mean, it's such a proactive area of law, right? It's designed to prevent fights and arguments and save family from a lot of hardship and grief. So,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I know we've integrated with My Life and Wishes. And again, that stemmed through my experience. Why am I getting 3 to 5 calls a month asking me if I'm the attorney that did the estate plan, or if I knew where it was recorded? And really, attorneys have 3 ways of handling this, right? Um, you either have a succession plan or you don't. And if you don't, these things die with your retirement or they die with you, right? But when we have this vault, which is why we've added it to our services, because it made sense to me, right? Like, what would I have wanted her to have? I would have wanted her to have a secure location to store these, and I'd want the important people to know where it is and how to access it. I mean, when somebody's going through that grief and I'm getting the phone call of like, hey, by off chance, did you do this estate plan? Like, these are grieving families. That's the last thing they should be worrying about. If somebody actually took the step to have a plan for their family,
right.
right? So this is that solution. So I mean, it seems like a minor thing, but it's not. The problem that it solves is one that lasts with people forever when they're going through this moment.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you were to ask my kids, and Michelle and I have 6 children as well, all adult, if you were to ask them, who my attorney is, or who my accountant, or who my financial advisor is, or where I bank, or what kind of accounts I have, or where my assets are located, or how to take down my digital identities, or if I have life insurance policy or a trust, and how do I find it, and they'd have no clue.
Right.
There goes the morbid scavenger hunt, digging through dead dad's drawers looking for things to try to find out what's there. And so, which is why we create it, so that we can solve that problem right away. The other piece to it that I really love, and man, I wish your grandmother had this and had been around when you were 23, because we have the video vault in there. And I don't want to make this about my platform, make this about you. But the vault, what I want to do is record things in there that might be of interest to my grandchildren. They won't be
Mm,
interested in my grandchildren when they're 10, 15, even 18. But when I'm gone, the questions that they would have, man, I wish I could ask grandpa this, because I've experienced those with my own grandparents, thinking, man, I wish I'd like listened when my nana was like talking about something, right? But I was a
yeah.
stupid kid and didn't care, but now I'd love to know. So
I mean,
it's
it makes
awesome.
sense. I mean, I think of my son when you say I'm not a grandparent yet, but my son turns 18 years old next month, and we already crossed that path where like maybe 15, I couldn't do a right thing in the world and I knew nothing about the world, right? But then I see how he responds to some of the foundational bricks that were laid then, now, years in the future. But what if something would have happened to me?
Right.
Like, how do we continue that process forward? So I love that. I'm all about, I come from we'll just call it a dysfunctional beginning.
Mhm.
Um, and I really love that idea of legacy, right? Like, obviously you're successful. Obviously you've had some wisdom that you've gained along the way, and to be able to give that to a generation at the time that they're attuned to hear it,
Right.
right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love it.
Create our own personal time capsule and they can listen to it when they're ready, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, hey, so let me get on to that topic and let's go with this. Since we call this show estate planning nightmares, and I'm really not trying to scare the bejesus out of people, but maybe I am, at least if it gets them to take action, right? So I have to ask, with all your experience and background, what are some of the most or the most significant nightmare pitfall you've seen? When people, don't plan their estates properly or don't plan them at all.
I mean, you have this general idea of families being ripped apart. Like, I've personally seen that as the attorney, or as a part-time judge, kind of sitting in the probate section. And I always relate it to the military made me a prosecutor at one point in time. And I remember I had this client that I knew was going to get a very large sentence based on the type of crime that he was uh, convicted of. And I remember kind of looking to the side. You have to stand at attention and be very straightforward. But I remember trying to get my eyes to see his reaction. And it was really unsatisfying to me because he didn't react all that much. Right. But I've seen moments in court where basic continuances, just because we don't have enough information. And I've seen uh, clients throw things at the judge, scream at the judge, attack each other. I've had security rush in to break up fights. And it's not that these are bad people, it's that we have unresolved resentments playing out at our worst time in life, right? Like, we handle grief differently. Some people don't like to feel sad, so they get angry. Some people try and ignore the problem. And some people like to control everything, right? And you have all of these family members that are doing their own grief thing that sometimes is explosive. And the problem is it's an impressionable moment in time. And I've heard countless clients say, I will never speak to my brother again, or I will never speak to my sister again. Or can you believe they did that? And sometimes it's warranted, and sometimes maybe not as much. But those are that's the general idea of not having a plan that sticks with me. But like, some of the worst things I've seen is uh, a spouse in their elderly years going through probate for their own stuff, right?
Oh,
Like, there was a separate account or something that was owned separately. So I'm thinking of one of my clients who was 85 years old. It was like this perfect storm, right? So she's 85 years old. She wasn't the one who managed the financials. She wasn't the one that really led the household that way. She loses her spouse, and she's my client because she's going through probate to get something the spouse had in his own name. At the same time, the market had crashed about 20% and they were on a fixed income. And they were married for over 50 years. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm pretty good about trying to keep a professional aura at least. But I remember sitting there thinking, like, I've got to fight these tears because she doesn't see and want to see another sad person in this reality, right? But
oh,
that was the moment she was in her final chapter, and she couldn't afford her life. And the other thing that you probably are aware of, but maybe some of the listeners are not, is when you start advancing in age and you're married, it's kind of like training wheels, right? And when you pull those training wheels off, you start to find where all the deficiencies are. And she's kind of in that moment too. So to have to move because she can't afford her lifestyle and where she's living of over 30 years, to me, I saw that as life threatening, right? And I started, and in that moment for me, I had people set up my financial plan where I wasn't down in the market. And I was like, who would have an 85-year-old at risk like this?
right.
And to my shock, it was like it was an advisor that I had been sending clients to as well. And
That
so
probably stopped quickly.
it did stop. It stopped immediately. And instead of saying like, and I think I think I had the real ability to say, I only am responsible for this portion of this process. Instead of doing that, I kind of took it as a personal failure. Who have I helped in the past that might have this outcome? And if I'm not the one to solve it, then who's going to? Right. So in that moment, I realized you need more education. You need to understand, yes, you're an expert in estate planning. Yes, you're an expert in asset protection. But man, you have to learn how money works too. Right? You have to understand that intimately if you really, really want to be the solution for your clients. And that was a game-changing moment. So while it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen play out, I always try and turn lemons into lemonade. How do we honor that moment? How do we make the most of it? And for me, that's why I added extra practice areas to me that are a new standard of the practice of law, right? If you can't understand estate planning, asset protection, financial planning, and taxes, then you're not going to be practicing at the same standard as someone else who does. So, but by far, that was one of the worst things I've seen because maybe it was personal to me, but it reminded me of my why to why I even do this and that kind of failure. And I do believe this. Everyone's last chapter, like we as a society have to live up to this standard. Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect for their last chapter of life. Like they deserve that. It's not like we know how hard life is, and I've heard this somewhere and I don't know where, but a society um, might be judged on the way they treat their children and their elders, the vulnerable part of the population. And America needs to step up, period.
Oh, amen, amen. I mean that, I think that's it. I think that is, ultimately on our judgment day, how we will be judged is how we treated others, right?
Mm.
It's a saying. Kind of a mentor of mine has, life gives to the giver, it takes from the takers, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of takers out there. Um, but yeah, I love that story because it's interesting because so many uh, older people, even older than me, you, people, like you say in the 80s, 85, they're from that generation where many times it was the husband who took care of all the finances
Yeah.
and did things. And I know with my own mother-in-law, when my father-in-law died, they'd been married for 63 years. She hadn't written a check, paid a bill, done anything in
Yes.
63 years. And so then we had to become intimately involved, and Michelle had to, get her power of attorney and do everything and handle all her finances and did everything for her for the last, 4 or 5 years of her life. Um, but I think what you're doing with your firm is game changing. You're taking it up another level from a lot of estate planning practices and really incorporating that whole wealth component
Right.
too. Where a lot of practices, they outsource that, but you did that once and it had a bad outcome, right?
Exactly.
So,
I mean, it's
uh,
like any other profession, right? And look, I can't speak to what was going on in that particular advisor's head. Like, I can't. I don't know I can't say it was malicious. I can't say it was self-serving, but I do understand all the options now. And there were some clear things that I feel like could be done that may have been against financial interests of the advisor, but you still do it because it's the right thing. Right. And that's the impression that I'm left with. Now that I know all the options, this was easily avoidable. Easily.
oh, yeah,
So
so much in life is right. Now, we can't control a car accident or whether or not we're getting Alzheimer's or dementia or stuff, but things like probate's avoidable. Right.
100%.
Running
Easily
out of
avoidable.
running out of money is avoidable.
Yes, it is.
Um, so, given all your experience, give me a little advice for families and individuals. What's like the one piece of advice you'd give to families or individuals who are now just starting to think about estate plan? And they could be young couples, they could be old people thinking, "Oh my God, I just heard what Andre said, and I don't want my wife to have to move out of the house when I die."
Right, right. I think if we think in terms of beyond ourselves and legacy, let me tell my personal vision of it and what kind of
Yeah.
drives me forward. I kind of alluded to I had more of a dysfunctional upbringing, but I oftentimes think like a lot of it was brought about from being poor. Now, I don't think money solves every problem, but I've been poor and I've not had to worry about money. And one of them is a lot better, in my opinion. You can guess which one. Um, but for me, it's about legacy. And I oftentimes in my own story think about if somebody would have done what I was willing to do a generation before, what of these negative experiences would have missed me, right? And I'll give you a few. Like, I've seen a heroin overdose. I've Needles have been so prevalent around me that we made them part of our childhood games. I've been chased, my sister and I, by drug dealers. I've been shot at. I've been robbed, right? And it's like if somebody before would have just maximized their life and did the right things, right? What were you called on this planet to do? And had the courage and some faith that it could be done, what would have been better? To me, that's estate planning, right? We spend how much of our life do we spend working, right? Let's say 40 hours. I think lots of us spend more time than that, right? 40
Mhm.
hours a week, the majority of our week, and then we leave the scraps for the weekends, right? We do that enough that we build something up, whatever it is. People have different ways they can build wealth, and wealth means different things to different people. And then it's like it comes time to protect it, and then we make the choice not to protect the thing we spent our entire life building for our family. And that's kind of the way I look at it. It's like this is not the time to not go with the best. It's not the time to say, oh, as an afterthought, let me go with the cheapest possible thing that may or may not work. And I know you understand what I mean by that, right?
Hey,
Um, it's a time to say, hey, I want to make sure I put together a plan that can increase the chances that wealth is going to transfer from my generation into the next one in hopes that they're going to use it for the better. And we're going to continue this forward trajectory and not a degeneration or a repeat cycle over and over. So, I mean, I love talking with all phases of people. I don't just talk to the wealthy, I don't just talk to the poor, but there's a message in this for everyone. If you don't live in a home, by golly, get yourself a home. That's the goal, right? History has proven that whether you're a homeowner or not drastically changes the trajectory of your family. And if you have a home, protect it. Do not let the state come in and take it in the last chapter of life because you failed to plan when the answers are right there, right? I'm not plugging even just myself, but if you're in my office, you can throw a rock in any direction on the third floor and hit an estate planning attorney,
you
right?
bet.
And they're all capable of doing this, right? So for me, it's like what I'd want my clients to understand is you're protecting your life's work, right?
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. No one likes talking about death and dying. No one does. And it's uncomfortable to think about our own demise. But let's just move forward through it uncomfortably and get the plan in place. And I know in my office, we can get this accomplished in two weeks to 30 days. And now you can go forward and live with the peace of mind that you've taken care of your loved ones. That's the energy that I want to put forward. And for my own family, for those that are listening, like it could be you that life's depending on to do this correctly. For me, it wasn't just I want to be an expert in estate planning or asset protection or financial services or tax strategy. For me, I felt like it was necessity for me to figure it out so that the next generations can start square, like the bare minimums of financial literacy, right? The bare minimum of a starting point, and maybe more, you know. But my objective personally is I want to become a billionaire so I can die a millionaire. Because I think we're, like you alluded to earlier, we're defined more about what we give than what we take. But to me, it's the
Absolutely.
gift of giving my life's work to the next generation, whatever it is. And some
Right.
people think, well, I don't have enough. Well, $100,000 is worth protecting. $50,000 is worth protecting, right? In fact, some of my
Absolutely.
more meager living clients, it was worth protecting more than some of my very wealthy clients.
Yeah, that's a very profound statement because there's a huge difference between a trust fund kid when ultimately mom or dad passed who got $10 million plus, and that family where mom and dad worked hard, saved, and they passed and they got $50,000. They'll take
Yeah.
care of that. They'll take care of that 50. And your story is awesome because again, you're proof that none of us have any choice in into the situation in which we are born into
Right.
and live through things. And I've seen it far too often. I've seen it with family actually, where there's certain segment of them that it's wash, rinse, repeat. They never break the chain. It's like, okay, maybe there's hope for the daughter, and then, nope, same path. Maybe there's hope for the grandchild, nope, same path. And until someone breaks that chain and that does the right thing, which they can, work hard and then protect the assets, whether it's 50,000 $500 million.
Hmm?
Yeah, you mentioned and I don't know your whole upbringing, but I can imagine where you were, where you lived, dealing with drug dealers and getting chased. I can tell anybody listening or watching, if you have crazy idea about trying to chase down Andre, I'd advise against that because this man is brown or black,
Brown belt. Brown
brown
belt.
belt jiu-jitsu. You've been into martial arts a long time. Nobody's going to mess with you. But I can tell you what I think is interesting. You have another passion, which is in your community,
Right.
and you work with kids, youth sports, and those things. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of it ties into jujitsu and helping younger kids. Can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, yeah. So it ties in. So everybody has their own life experience. I know when I was younger, one of the things that got me through and helped me not make certain mistakes was basketball. In fact, I'm going to the Suns game tonight. I love basketball.
Go Suns!
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited for tonight. But the idea was this. I was focused on a game that honestly I was doomed to fail from the beginning. And there are people that are my height that went on to the NBA. So, but I'm only 5'8" and 3/4. But I
Spud
loved,
Webb.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I loved that game, and it gave me an outlet that I could put in some of my negative emotions and have them pop out well. And honestly, sometimes I put in my negative emotions there and they didn't come out so well, but it gave me direction. So a bunch of guys that I train with, we all got together and we're like, man, jujitsu is such a positive thing. And everybody was a former athlete. And then we got to thinking, well, sports is a positive thing. But it just doesn't end with sports. I mean, choir. whatever it is, mathletes, whatever it is that can catch your attention towards a positive direction. But all of us were former athletes, and we say, you know what? We all had a piece of that story where sports really helped change our trajectory or kept us out of trouble just long enough to get the edge to be able to make that next right choice. When my journey of basketball ended, it was at a very, very fine turning point for me. But basketball at least had me standing in college. And because I was standing in college, I did college things instead of street things. And it was the only thing that had me standing there, right? And we all had similar stories. So we said, let's give back that way. Let's make it so that our youth, our distressed youth that can't necessarily afford things, because jujitsu, you have to buy a gi, there's monthly fees. You know, any sport, there's fees associated with it. Well, the idea was if we can bring sports to those who couldn't afford it, that might give them a little bit of edge. Not to mention, what did I learn from sports? What did I think I was learning? I was thinking I was going to be a professional athlete. Well, guess what? I learned success. I learned failure. I learned how to be a part of a team. I learned how to be a leader. And more importantly, I learned what it was like to be a leader and fail and understand what it feels like to fail myself, to fail my teammates, and how to pick up. And it creates this resiliency, and it teaches so much about life. I would say 40%, if not more, of my leadership characteristics I learned through playing basketball, right? And we thought, well, if we can give more of this to children who need it, right, then they have a little bit of extra skill set that they can use for the next step in their journey. So we were all passionate about it. And all of us, I think, also had like maybe things that were left to be desired in our childhood and can really relate to that. And like we said earlier, how we treat our children, how we treat our elderly, like I do believe our character is defined by that, not as a society, but also as people. Am I going to be a person that thinks about ideas that I could possibly do? Or are we going to be the kind of people that think the ideas and put them into action? So we decided to put it into action. So we have children that are in martial arts, equine, sports, cheerleading, basketball, football, that are just easing that burden on the families, right? I oftentimes think back, like I didn't get to go to all the special basketball camps that some of the other kids got to go to because we couldn't afford it, right? Um, and we want to make sure we're creating solutions for that. So that's what we do for Arizona's youth. The vision on that, as you might expect, is a lot larger than where it is, but that's what we're doing now, and it's positive.
I love that. I love that. And if you don't mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to that in the
Awesome.
show notes because if people are listening, if you're here in Arizona, if you're not in Arizona, but you just care about youth and you want to help out, I know you can actually donate
Yes.
to the cause, which helps lots and lots of kids. So I'm going to put a link in there. People can check it out because it's pretty cool.
Thank you. And one of the things we're most proud of is like our cost for administration is next to nothing, right? So it all goes towards the kids.
I love that. I love that. You guys are doing it the right way, from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my thing is this, you can't forget where you came from. Like I know the little things that caused me to zig instead of zagging, right? And
Yeah.
sports was one of them, and having people that I felt like, wow, this person actually cares. I think with our youth, so many of them are just ignored, and you start out life thinking that people don't care, right? And especially if you have parents that kind of give you that message unintentionally, right? To have other
Yep.
adults, I've um at one point in time I did foster care homes also.
Oh, wow.
Um, but just to sit and talk with a child and let them talk to you, and to have an adult as like a, I'll call it a pure heart. Like there's no ulterior motive other than I care about you. Not enough of our youth in that situation have those moments, right? And we can
Yeah.
call it what we want to, but it's going to turn out one of two ways, right? Our children can get the tools they need and become productive members of society, or they don't, and they become the other part of society, right? And we also have a society that ignores that fact. You know, there's a study out there that shows that um, the amount of money we put in the prison system, right? If we took a fraction of that, I think it was like a quarter of every dollar that was spent, and we put that on youth programs, right? That's where the impact is, right? And I kind of adhere to that. Like I did prosecution, I did defense work at different times, right? And adults are adults. Children, we can always make impact,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if they could do that, I mean, our prison systems would be far less crowded. There's still going to be those that don't make it through, but if we're giving them a chance, and what's a better thing than an at-risk youth, but someone like you or me who will sit down and actually listen to them, not judge them. Say, I've walked in your shoes, so
right.
tell me what's going on. And then with the work y'all are doing at Arizona's Children Coalition, you're giving all those kids a real shot.
Yeah, I mean, think of in the simplest form, all we're trying to do is we're role models, whether we know it or not,
Yeah,
right? We're just
we could
trying to
be a
be,
good one or a bad one,
you could
right?
be a good one or a bad one. And for us, we've just tried to be good ones. And I say try because we're not always 100% in life,
Right.
right? But for me, as long as I'm following that right voice, that right spirit inside, I know that the final product's going to be good, right? And it's like, yeah, I've done the same things you've done. I've made the same mistakes. I've gone through some of the same experiences. But number one, um, we can make it. A story popped in my mind if I could share real quick.
Oh, please, please.
Back when I did the foster homes, all they knew was a lawyer had started them. They didn't know much more than that. So this rumor went through my homes that it was a racist person and that all of the rules were set up against them. And at the time, Barack Obama was the president. And I remember there was um, a staff meeting, and I said, "Hey, I'll take all the kids while the staff meeting's going on." Well, it was the first time they met me, right?
The
I
racist
went,
lawyer, or
yeah, the
yeah.
racist lawyer, right? Who they didn't know came out of foster care, who they didn't know was doing this out of the kindness of his heart and just wanting to do more. But the biggest thing was the way their jaws dropped when I introduced myself. And there were a lot of different phases of like different cultures and things that came through. But there were enough people that looked like me at that time that their jaws dropped. And one of the messages I said, and I think it's important, is a lot of times we use some of the realities in life to hold ourselves back, right? But I told him this because I believed it was true. If you were making that story up, I am anything but that, right? And if you were making that story up as a reason why you were continuing to fail, you have to understand that's a brain dysfunction, right? And
Yeah.
instead, you have the power and the choice to make up a different story, right? Here was the story they could have made up. If Barack Obama could be president, whether they like him or not, whether people like him or not, then there's not enough racism going around that it can stop me, right? That's a story you can make up, right? Or, yeah, maybe there is some in life, but I can overcome it. Or
Mhm.
maybe I judge people a little bit and I got to stop doing that, right? But the big thing I wanted him to know is like, this is the reality, right? I look just like you, just I'm 30 years older or whatever it was in the moment. right? And I started
Yeah.
from where you're at, and I understand your pain and the trauma, and I actually care about it too, right? And
Yeah.
I like to think that moments like that in life can be just a little spark that later on, when it connects with another thing, will actually help that person zig when they could have zagged.
And you know how we can all do that? It's simple. Just be a good person. It's not that hard.
No,
Oh
no.
man. I got to tell you, Andre, I mean, I could stay on here and we could chat for hours. I got so many things. Maybe we'll get you back up in here.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah, absolutely. But before we wrap, and again, I'm going to put into the show notes information about the coalition. But how can our listeners reach out to you if they want to learn more about your services, questions on the coalition, anything?
Oh, somebody's coming in to drop out files for me to sign.
Always
Um,
busy, always busy.
yeah, ArizonaChildren'sCoalition.com. My law firm is PennLaw.com with two N's. You can also go to UniversalWealth.com. These are all organizations that I run. All of them are run from the same spirit as you've heard on the show. It's with the idea to do something valuable that the world needs, but also do it the right way so everybody involved are brought to a higher level. So universal wealth in my mind is that we're capable of anything if we're willing to put in the work. And our minds are very, very, very powerful, right? And if we put them in the right direction and commit to elevating them just 1% more every day, every 100 days we'll do something where we didn't think we were capable of.
Oh, that's awesome. You get so much going on, man. I'm telling you, all these businesses, you got to sign some papers there. You've got the big family at home, but you're still going to make time to get your workout in and see the Suns win tonight.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Well, hey, Andre, brother, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares. Hey, if you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and remember, your life is your legacy. So plan ahead, and we'll see you next time.